This episode of Sessler Something is brought to you by Audible. All right, Sessler Something. I'm currently on vacation, but I was not going to deny you the sound of my voice. No, I'm answering some of your questions from the past. All right, the first is actually two questions together. One is from Elliot, and it says, what is your opinion on cinematic presentation in games becoming more prevalent? Do you think this trend is here to stay? And there's also a question from Krister. Do you think that Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons benefited from having a movie director as the creative lead director? And if you didn't know that, yes, he is a movie director here in Sweden, instead of just an employee from the company Starbreeze. I like these two questions. And yes, Krister, I did not know that there was a movie director on the helm. And that kind of answers a couple of questions. But first, the general idea of games being more cinematic. One thing I've noticed over the past few years is the word cinematic is not being used as much. This used to be this marketing term that was shoved down my throat. It's like, look, we're doing these cinema things with like racked focus and like film grain over stuff. And I actually found it quite fatiguing. I've never been a fan of games chasing cinema, as if there was a goal to become cinematic, and then it would create some kind of equity with movies, and suddenly games would be sort of justified as an art form. Having said that, I think that there's obviously a lot of influence from cinema that's on games. And Krister, kind of to your question, I don't know how much it benefited from having a film director, because if you really look at all the games that are out there, and people who make games, they are very, very well versed in cinema, if not necessarily trained in cinema, and you start to see that that influence. But to your point, I loved Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. It was such a wonderful game, and I think there might be some reason of his being a director that may have influenced it, and that's because he's Swedish. That is the land of Bergman, and there's a quiet reticence in the storytelling, not beating you over the head and just going for images and not having a lot of spoken word. That reminds me of the great Ingmar Bergman. And so if anything, I think that is the game that is most Bergman-esque out there, and that is a compliment. All right, before we get to the next question, let's thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible is the leading provider of downloadable audiobooks with over 150,000 titles to choose from across every genre. Best of all, you can get a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook download of your choice by signing up at audiblepodcast.com/something. And in honor of the new year, I'm just recommending a really good book that's one of my favorites, Haruki Murakami's incredible The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. Again, that link for a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial is audiblepodcast.com/something. All right, our second question comes from Maggie. What do you think Nintendo has to do to make a recovery on the Wii U? I know there are more games coming out for it, but that still doesn't seem to be drawing much attention from consumers. This is the perennial question. I honestly don't know. Currently, as of this taping, it does not appear that the Mario game, 3D World, actually sold as many copies as one would assume. That, Mario games, Zelda games, they tend to be that great boost. I think that is really due to the fact that so many games have also been coming out at the end of the year. You have next-gen systems. You're really spreading the gamer's dollar very, very thin. In terms of sort of the long play and getting people back, I don't know if anyone's going to like my answer. They need to change the controller. And I'm saying that even with an eye towards the Pro controller. I think that the games that are being made for the Wii U seem to still be coming from a mindset of a more traditional controller. And even the Pro controller follows, in the way where the buttons are below the stick. And you know what? After how many years for most people of creating that muscle memory of where buttons are in relation to the analog stick, it really is challenging. And a game would have to be very specifically designed that de-emphasizes the needs for almost every single button on the pad. That in turn allows for, I guess, less complexity in terms of the player interaction with the game. I just think that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with what's inside of that box. But the idea of having the gamepad and what it was supposed to do has not been fleshed out yet. And it seems that for the first time, and very unlike the original Wii, Nintendo made the controller, made the big innovative design change, and never had a game in mind for it. I think Nintendo still has incredibly creative people there, and their game design is something only Nintendo can do. Just make the games and stop trying to run after this casual audience that is casual and not paying attention. Go for that core gamer who will always be there. They just want games to play and games that are fun to play.